The blizzard arrived without warning, the way mountains often deliver judgment swift, total, and unconcerned with plans. Elena Markov had lived alone in the timberline cabin for 7 winters now, long enough to know when the wind sounded wrong. That night, the wind screamed. Snow slammed sideways into the cabin walls, rattling the shutters like bones in a sack. The generator coughed once and died. Darkness swallowed the room, broken only by the orange glow of the wood stove and the steady crack of burning pine. Elena pulled her wool blanket tighter around her shoulders and reached for the radio. Static. No signal. The storm was thick enough to smother sound itself. Then she heard it. A howl, not one. Many, close. She froze not in fear, but in recognition. Wolves. They'd been moving lower for weeks. Hunger did that. Storms did that. 20, maybe more, judging by the overlapping calls echoing through the trees. She stood slowly and crossed to the window. Frost had already spidered across the glass, but she wiped a clear patch with her sleeve. Shapes moved in the white chaos outside. Dark forms pressed low against the wind, circling the cabin, stopping, lifting their heads. They weren't hunting. They were freezing. Elena swallowed. She knew the rules. Everyone in the valley did. Never invite wolves in. Never make herself part of their story. But the storm howled louder, and the temperature dropped fast enough that the breath inside her cabin fogged. Another sound cut through the wind. A yelp. High. Painful. Young. Elena closed her eyes. Damn it, she whispered. She pulled on her boots and parka, ignoring the voice in her head that sounded suspiciously like common sense. The door protested as she opened it, snow blasting in like an angry spirit. They stood there, 20 wolves. Massive, ice-crusted, ribs showing beneath fur soaked stiff with frost. Their eyes reflected the firelight gold, green, pale silver. The largest stood at the front. The alpha. He was enormous. Scarred muzzle, one ear torn nearly in half. Snow clung to his fur like ash. His stance wasn't aggressive, but it wasn't submissive either. He stared at her. And then, impossibly, he lowered his head. Elena's breath caught. She understood animals. Not in some mystical way, just years of watching, listening, respecting distance. Wolves didn't beg. Unless they had nothing left. She stepped back and opened the door wider. Just for the storm, she said aloud, her voice shaking. You hear me? Just the storm. The alpha didn't move. She turned her back on him deliberately. A calculated risk. An invitation without challenge. The first wolf crossed the threshold, then another, then all of them. The cabin filled with steam, wet fur, and the low, constant sound of breathing. Wolves pressed shoulder to shoulder, curling tight against the walls, the floor, each other. Some limped. One dragged a hind leg uselessly. Another had ice frozen around its muzzle, where blood had dried. Elena shut the door and leaned against it, heart hammering. No one attacked her. No one growled. The alpha entered last. He paused, towering over her, close enough that she could see the frost melting along his whiskers. For a long moment, they stared at each other. Then he turned away and lay down between the door and the rest of the pack. Guarding them. Guarding her. The night stretched on. Elena fed the stove until her arms ached. She melted snow, set out every scrap of dried meat she had, every old can of stew, even the emergency rations she'd sworn never to touch. The wolves ate silently, efficiently, never fighting, never snapping. The alpha did not eat. He watched. Every time she moved, his eyes followed, not with hunger, with assessment. By dawn, the storm had buried the cabin halfway to the roof. Elena woke on the floor near the stove, wrapped in blankets she didn't remember pulling over herself. Her back ached. Her fingers were numb. The cabin was quiet, too quiet. She bolted upright. The wolves were gone. The door stood open, snow drifting in lazily. Her chest tightened. Hey, she whispered, stupidly. Hey, wait! She stood, dizzy, and staggered outside. The world was blinding white and blue, the storm finally broken. The forest stood frozen in crystalline silence. They were all there. 20 wolves lined up in the snow. And at the front, the alpha. He stepped forward. Elena's instincts screamed at her to stop moving, to make herself small. Instead, she straightened, meeting his gaze. He lowered his head again, but this time he did something else. He stepped closer and pressed his forehead gently against her stomach. Not a shove, a touch. her breath caught in her throat. Behind him, the pack sat, perfectly still. Elena slowly reached out and rested her hand on his head. His fur was warm, alive. I didn't do anything special, she murmured. You would have survived without me. The alpha lifted his head and looked at her like she was wrong. Then he turned and walked past her toward the tree line. After 3 steps he stopped. Looked back, waited, her heart pounded. No, she said, half laughing, half terrified. I can't, this is my home. The alpha didn't move. The pack didn't move. The forest waited. Elena looked back at the cabin. Smoke curled from the chimney. Safe, silent, empty. For the first time in years, the thought of staying felt wrong. She exhaled slowly and stepped forward. The alpha turned and led the way. They didn't go far, just to the ridge overlooking the valley. From there, the alpha stopped and looked at her one last time. Then he howled. The sound rolled across the snow, deep and resonant, answered instantly by the others. When the howl faded, the alpha nudged her gently back toward the cabin with his nose. A dismissal, a blessing, a promise. She watched them disappear into the trees, 20 shadows moving as one. Elena returned to the cabin alone, but she was not the same. From that winter on, wolves guarded the valley, no livestock lost. No travelers vanished. Storms still came, but people survived them. And sometimes on the worst nights, Elena would hear a howl outside her window. Not a warning, not a threat, a greeting. Because the wolves had taken her once, and they had never truly let her go.